Hello everyone, I hope that you are doing well. This is going to be our first lesson on ethics, values in the social world, and I'd just like to introduce to you the course. In this course, we will talk about social problems and various types, and what social problems are issues or concerns that people of various populations have, and they can vary tremendously. Not everyone will have the same viewpoint or experiences regarding a particular social issue. So I'd like for you to take some time to think about issues that you care about, and also think about why you care about those particular issues. What about your own background or experiences make you think about that issue as a problem? In this class, we will talk about a number of things. This will be our first question to discuss fully on the discussion board. Okay, 1, what is ethical? I want you to define and discuss this. And if you want to bring up an example, that's great. Next question, what is just? And what is justice? Thirdly, do we have a consensus or overall agreement about the two questions above? Why might we have an agreement, and what may cause some dissension or disagreement? Okay, so to understand ethics, values, and questions about what is just, right, or good, it's important to take on the sociological imagination. And there are various parts to this that we'll discuss together. 1, troubles. Troubles are defined as problems from events in one's own life. So this focuses on the individual. What's causing that person to have problems in their life or not have their life go as conveniently as they would like. Next, issues. Issues affect large groups of people and come from the structure of society. And social structures are patterns of behavior, relationships, and institutions that make up society. Social structures or examples of social structures include education, the economy, government, and so on. What's important about issues is that it's not just about one individual's concerns, it's about large groups of people and populations, and these various social structures put pressure or force which enable them or constrain their behavior. So what is sociology? You may have not taken a sociology course before, so I'd like to discuss this a little bit further. Sociology is the systematic study of human behavior in social context. The sociological perspective stresses the social context in which people live. It examines how these contexts influences people's lives. At the center of the sociological perspective is the question of how groups influence people, especially how people are influenced by their society. A group of people who share culture and territory. So again, a society is a group of people who share a culture and territory. So how does society influence the individual's attitudes and behaviors? Okay? And we're trying to investigate what causes people or groups of people to act certain ways or think certain ways, which lead us to think about those issues as social problems. Okay? Social causes or social forces are distinct from physical and emotional causes. Again, moving away from the individual and onto the social structural level or the macro level of society. The social context of the organization of the social world opens up some opportunities, enables some people, but also constrains our freedom. And this is really dependent upon if a group of people have more privilege, and privilege is simply access to scarce resources. So in terms of wealth, power, and prestige. So what can sociology do? Sociology can help us see the operation of the social world more clearly. Okay, Sociology is a social science. We use a scientific method to ask questions, gather data, analyze them, and present findings to the world about what we're doing in our society and how groups of people are affected by social structures, forces, and institutions. Social research has been motivated by a desire to improve the social world. And so we may get into this debate about objectivity and subjectivity. In all reality, there is no such thing as objectivity when it comes to social sciences. First off, even the questions that we ask come from a place of value. You're asking that question because you care about it, right? You have this issue that you are a problem that you want to have a solution for. So objectivity may work well in the natural sciences, but in the social sciences, values are everywhere. Okay? Sociologists try to understand social phenomenon and suggest ways of improving their societies. Okay? And so again, we're not just simply pointing out social problems. We will develop solutions to these problems and think about critically how these social solutions can benefit some groups, but again, disadvantage other groups. And again, the sociological perspective helps us see a wide range of ideas, perspectives, behaviors, and attitudes. There's no right way of seeing any issue. So there are three major levels of sociology. The microstructures are simply the individual level. They are patterns of intimate social relations. So your relationships with yourself, with your friends, your family, and other people more intimate with you. The macrostructures are patterns of social relations outside your circle of intimates and acquaintances. And in terms of institutions and structures, again, as I stated before, these are things usually we cannot see, but they have tremendous impact on us. They can enable us or constrain us. And some examples include education. If you have an education, a higher education, college education, what can you do versus someone who may just have a high school diploma? Again, this is a structure that enables some people and maybe disadvantage others. Next, mesosociology. It involves how the microstructures and macrostructures interact. So what's the relationship between the individual or groups and the macrostructures of society? Next, we'll dive into theory, and this is a huge component of our course, and there's some videos that I will post on D2L to help you understand this with a visual example. But again, with your assignment, you'll have to incorporate a sociological perspective for every assignment outside of your outlines. Okay? So first, let's start with functionalism. This is a macro theory. And there's various tenets of this theory. One is that human behavior is governed by social structures. Okay? These larger institutions and structures have forces on people and groups of people to either allow them to act as they wish or constrain their behavior. And again, this is dependent upon their level of access to scarce resources of wealth, power, and prestige. Functionalism also shows how social structures are maintained or undermine social stability. So those from more privileged positions want to maintain how society looks because they're in the position to create it, and it gives them power. Whereas those who have less access to scarce resources find that the society is unstable. They don't have access to things that they need to make better choices or have choices. So social stability is good on the surface, but it also does not allow for equal distribution of scarce resources. Functionalism emphasized that social structures are based upon our shared values. And so we agree that this is how this structure works. For instance, this is how law works in America. And this, again, by understanding how these structures work collectively, it allows some sense of stability in our society. Next, this theory suggests that reestablishing the equilibrium or healthy state of society can best solve most social problems. So we'll do what we have to do with little conflict to go back to this healthy state or equilibrium. Functionalism really doesn't do a very good job of explaining conflict. It doesn't see conflict as beneficial. The next theory is almost in opposition to functionalism, and that's conflict theory. And it focuses on how macro level structures such as class relations work. And so with this comes the idea of Marxism, where there's two major classes, or the elites and then the working class. And the elites have more resources. They have access to scarce resources, wealth, power, and prestige. They maintain society. They create the laws, values, and institutions that benefit themselves. And at the bottom are the working class, the proletariat. They don't have good access to those scarce resources, and they will go through conflict and able to redistribute those scarce resources. Okay? Conflict theory shows how major patterns of inequality produce stability in some circumstances and change in others. So how can inequality be good? Well, if things are not fairly distributed in terms of scarce resources, you want change. And conflict produces change in most cases. And so we see things like, for instance, the civil rights movement, the women's right to vote. Those are conflictual events in our history. But the end result, we see that there's more access to scarce resources for these groups who are once marginalized. Conflict theory again stresses how members of privileged groups try to maintain advantages while subordinate groups struggle to increase theirs. So there's always this class struggle, okay? People want to have more of something that they feel like they're not getting enough of or don't have fair access to. And so we'll see conflict throughout history to finally play out we see conflict to level out the playing field. So we talk about in our society this being a land of the free, the home of the brave, and we have equal access to things. We have a land of equal opportunity. But that is not truly what's happening. That is what we want in theory. It's not our reality just yet. Okay. Next, conflict theory leads to the suggestion that eliminating privilege will lower the level of conflict and increase total human welfare. And so if we didn't have these different levels of stratification and things were leveled out or more fair, there wouldn't be conflict. So until we have equal access to scarce resources, we'll still have conflict in our society. The next theory that we'll use is symbolic interactionism, and this focuses on interpersonal communication in the micro level of social settings, so on the individual or very intimate level of our society. The emphasis is in this theory, on the social life as possible only because people attach meanings to things. So every object, interaction, people even have meanings attached to them. So for instance, we could take the red octagon at the end of streets. That's a stop sign. What does it mean to stop? What does this symbolize? What does this sign symbolize? Another thing that we can attach meaning to are our physical bodies. What does it mean to have more melanin than another person? What does skin color really denote in our society? Everything has meaning. What does your thumbs up mean in our culture? It means good or way to go. But in other cultures, that can be extremely offensive. But again, we as a society have developed meanings. And we have this agreement about what these interactions, objects, and even people mean. Symbolic interactionism stresses on the notion that people help to create their social circumstances and do not merely react to them. So unlike the macro level, it talks about the forces, institutions, and structures putting forces on people to cause them to react or behave a certain way, this theory says that we have agency to cause change, to change our social circumstances. and not just reacting to them. So this gives the individual groups more power. Next, validation of unpopular and non-official viewpoints is emphasized by focusing on the subjective meanings people create in small social settings. And so all opinions or values or perspective are valid. Each person or group of people can develop their own meanings. Next, symbolic interactionism talks about or focuses on the idea of social constructionism. And please watch the video in detail all about this. This means that when people interact, they assume things are natural, more natural than what they really are. Nothing is natural, nothing is inherent. Everything has meanings attached to them. Okay, so for instance, let's think about money. It is an item, it's tangible, it's green. All these things we can see with our see and feel with our senses. But there's so much meaning attached to that thing. And this is how we develop the meaning and value of an object or a person. An issue that we are still dealing with, since the inception of this country is racism. And often we hear the idea that race is socially constructed. It is. Race is not a biological reality. What it is in our country is really about skin color, hair texture, facial feature, and body type. And we attach meanings to these physical things. The meanings are not inherent, no, but the physical realities are real. Okay, but we're not saying that if you have kinky hair that you are going to be more criminal, or if you have dark skin you're going to be more criminal. There's nothing inherent about skin color and have more melanin and criminality. That's something that has developed throughout our history. That is how race is socially constructed. So for those visual learners, this chart is for you to help you really categorize what the theory is, the level of analysis or level of society, and what the focus is really about in that particular theory. Okay, so we see here going across, we have the functionalist perspective, the level of analysis, the macro level of society, institutions, and structures, and talks about how we have these core shared values that help us have stability or homeostasis in our society. Okay, next, conflict theory, again, is on the macro level of society, and it focuses on inequality, that we really have this class struggle, and what we're trying to achieve in the end is this redistribution of scarce resources so that things are seen as more fair or equal. The next level is symbolic interactionism. It's a micro level theory, and it focuses on meanings and how we create meanings. We have agency and with this particular theory. A theory that we not have covered but is really important when talking about social problems is the feminist theory. It's both macro and micro. It's macro and then talks about how institutions have privileged, in particular, males and disadvantaged women, and also privileged people of privileged groups versus others. It also is focused on the micro level of society. What does it mean to have developed gender roles, and how do we develop those, how do we share those, and how do we reinforce that? And the focus on most feminist causes is dismantling patriarchy, which is really about the men having control of how our society functions, men being in more power than women. Okay, so to rehash this again, in the functionalist perspective, this is the main question. How do institutions of society contribute to social stability? Again, the macro level and what we focus on, stability. Conflict theories ask, how do privileged groups maintain advantages and subordinate groups increase theirs, often causing social change in the process? So how can conflict be beneficial? Next, symbolic interactionism. How do individuals communicate to make their social settings meaningful? So how do we socially construct meaning? How do we interact together? How is that even possible unless we have shared meanings? So in the course of this semester, these are questions that we should often ask and think about it using the theoretical perspectives we just gone over. So we'll ask, what is right, good, and ethical? And this really depends on the perspective taken and an individual's experiences, so it can vary widely. We will examine what is ethical using sociological perspective. So these three theories are what we're going to focus on: functionalism, conflict theory, and symbolic interactionism. You really have to learn these. This is so important to do your assignments well. We'll use the sociological imagination to develop solutions for current problems. Again, the idea of how we can move from the individual level into more group and societal level, move past our individual troubles to issues, and how can we develop solutions. Okay, so again, we're going to look at all these different levels of society using social theory to develop social solutions to our problems.